Hi guys, today I'm going to be attempting for the first time to cast an aluminium slingshot. I'm going to be attempting to cast this slingshot design, and I made the mould out of clay and put it in a pot filled with soil. I know that casting aluminium and melting it is incredibly dangerous, so I have all of the necessary safety equipment like goggles and leather gloves and stuff like that. I'm going to be using a steel tin for the crucible, and I'll be melting the aluminium in a small barbecue, which I've got aluminium foil underneath so that the heat doesn't set the wood blower on fire. Right, I'm just going to light the fire.
Right, so now I'm just using a hairdryer to blow onto the fire and give the fire more oxygen, and it does really help to get the fire going as well.
Now I'm just going to let that start to get going.
One of the problems with doing this though is that it makes the wood run out really quickly, so I'd advise using coal or charcoal, and I'll be using that later on in the video.
Right, so now that the fire's got hot enough, I'm going to put in a test a bit of aluminium in my crucible just to check that it works. Right, so I've buried it deep in the coals down there, and I'm just going to add up some more coal around it to make sure that it gets hot enough. Alright, so after a lot of testing, I've realised that it's pretty hard to melt aluminium foil. The problem is that aluminium is a really reactive metal, but it doesn't react because of the oxide layer that it gets on the surface. But aluminium foil is so thin that when you use it in the fire, the oxide layer just keeps on happening over and over again, and it doesn't really melt. So to fix that, I get the aluminium and I scrunch it up into a ball and then hammer it really, really hard, and it does eventually manage to melt. And this is how much I've melted so far. So the way that you make this is you need to get your aluminium foil and then roll out a really, really, really long bit. Right, so now that I've got this big piece of aluminium, you need to just fold it in half.
So once you've folded it down into a smallish square, you just want to get a hammer and start hitting it as hard as you can, and hitting it a lot until it gets into quite a solid small square, which kind of feels like a solid piece of metal and not just aluminium foil.
So now that you've got it all hammered down, that's ready to melt, and it should melt fine. So it's a new day. I had to put the fire out overnight, but I got it going again, and I made my first ingot. To make the ingot, it took about 4 of these melted in the crucible. So, and I guess for my slingshot, it's going to take about 5 or 6 of these ingots. So I'm going to video me pouring this ingot just so you can see how I do it. Right, so I've got enough aluminium melted to make the next ingot, so I'm just going to show you me pouring that out now. Just get that out. This is incredibly dangerous, and I have a fire extinguisher with me, and I'm being incredibly careful with this. So, I'll just pour it in. Right, so the ingot should have cooled by now. I'll just use the pliers to get it out. No. It's fine, it's...
Right, so now I'm just blowing the hairdryer in to the fire and melting all of the ingots at once in the crucible. It would help maybe if you put a lid on the crucible, because I've heard that that helps, but I didn't have one at the time. And also, if any of you know a good tutorial of how to make a forge where you can blow in the air from the bottom, that would be useful, because it would be a lot easier to melt the aluminium than blowing the air in from the top.
Right, so I've melted all of the ingots and I've got it hot enough now, so I'm just going to take it out and pour it into the mould. It's very heavy. I'm going to pour the excess into the ingots. So this is a slingshot once I've taken it out of the mould. It's pretty good, apart from it's really rough on this side, the side that was down on the mould, because I must have used the wrong clay because it started to crack and explode, and that has caused a rather annoying bit here. Right, so now I'm in my treehouse and I'm going to start.
So I started off by using file on the aluminium, but I soon realised that it wasn't doing very much, so I moved over to my grinder and put on my safety goggles. But the grinder got clogged up with aluminium somehow, and it wasn't grinding the aluminium very fast at all. So I then moved on to my sander, and it started to grind the aluminium a bit faster, but then I realised that it's going to take a very long time to finish this slingshot off.
So after hours and hours of filing, I finally got the handle kind of smooth, but there's still all of these massive holes and dips in there, and I tried to fill them with solder, but the solder didn't bond with the aluminium, and I kind of expected that, but still it was worth a try, so I might try and fill them with epoxy resin maybe. Also, the slingshot's now quite thin where the top of the forks are, and it'll easily be strong enough still, but I'm just worried that it might rip the bands quite quickly, so I'm just going to put some wood on the back sides here. Right, okay, so I've just skipped the finished slingshot now because the video is getting a bit long. So I've banded it up with TheraBand Gold and I added the wood on the back, and that stops the bands from ripping and it makes the fork long enough, but you can also hold the slingshot and it feels really, really nice. I've also sanded it really, really smooth to 400 grit and filled all of these holes with epoxy, obviously being careful of all of the toxic fumes that the epoxy makes while you're sanding it and while it dries. Although it doesn't look great, I still really, really like how it feels, and it feels really smooth, and I think it was a really, really good first attempt, but next time when I make the next one, I'm going to have to make the mould out of something else other than clay. Okay, so now it's time to see how it shoots. So I'm just going to be firing it against that big mat with a towel in front of it and hitting the milk carton. Right, so this is what the milk carton looks like afterwards. It's got a massive hole in it, massive hole there, and some of them have came out the other side, like that. This video was actually requested by someone who commented below on one of my videos asking for me to cast an aluminium slingshot, and I did it. So if you have any other project ideas that you think I should make or that you'd like to see me make, just post a comment down below. Thank you very much for watching this video. I put a lot of effort into it, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, maybe comment or subscribe.